The Wyoming wind was a beast that night. It came screaming down from the mountains, rattling the pine roof and slamming against the cabin walls like a battering ram. Eli had been sitting close to the iron stove, mending a torn bridle strap when the faint knock came. At first, he thought it was just the wind playing tricks. The second knock made him set down the leather and reach for his Winchester. No one traveled in a storm like this unless they were running from death or carrying it with them. When he opened the door, the blizzard tried to rip it from his hands. A figure swayed on the threshold. A woman dressed frozen stiff, hair laced with ice, lips the color of dusk. One hand clutched a small bag like it was her last anchor to the world. She was shaking so hard her teeth made a sound like breaking glass. Eli didn't waste words. He pulled her inside, slammed the door, and shoved the iron bar into place. He knew if she stayed in those wet clothes, she wouldn't last an hour. He handed her a flannel shirt, turned his back to give her what little privacy the cabin allowed, and built the fire higher. By the time she had changed, she was wrapped in his shirt and a heavy wool blanket, hands curled around a steaming cup of coffee he pressed into her fingers. Color slowly crept back into her cheeks. She ate the bean soup he ladled without ceremony like someone who had forgotten what food was and had just remembered again. Only then did he ask her name. Maggie Doyle, she said, voice rough but steady. I came from Boston to marry Owen Blackgay. He met me at the station, took one look and told me I wasn't suitable for ranch life. Left me at the crossroads with fare to go back east. The storm came before I could. Eli knew Owen, rich, proud, and mean when it suited him. The kind of man who measured everything in land and profit. You walked from the station? Eli asked. She nodded. There was no coach. The fare wasn't enough for a hotel room and meals both. So, I walked. I had no other choice. She said it like a fact, not a plea. That alone made Eli respect her. He told her she could stay as long as the storm lasted. She offered to work for her keep, cook, clean, mend. But Eli shook his head. No talk of burdens tonight. Surviving comes first. Quote, that night she slept in his bed while he rolled up by the stove in his buffalo robe. In the dark, over the roar of the storm, she asked quietly, why didn't you ask me more questions about why he really turned me away? Eli stared at the stove glow. Owen doesn't do anything without profit in mind. If he sent you packing, it wasn't because you weren't suitable. It was because he thought there was nothing to gain. There was silence broken only by the howl of the wind. Then her voice, softer than before. You think I'm pretty, think you're alive, Eli said. And in a storm like this, that's what matters. By morning, the storm was worse. The cabin half buried in snow. Eli fried biscuits and gravy while Maggie stood wrapped in his quilt. Her hair freed from the ice was a deep chestnut threaded with copper. She tried to braid it, but strands escaped, curling wild around her face. They ate together, the silence between them no longer empty, but heavy with things neither had spoken. Over the next days, survival fell into rhythm. Eli checked on the cattle while Maggie kept the fire steady. Learning the ways of the stove, she mended his shirts with neat practice stitches, baked bread with starter she mixed from flour and water, and kept her hands busy even when her heart was heavy. Eli watched her from across the cabin, noting the quiet strength in her movements. She wasn't soft, as Owen had judged. She was still wrapped in gentleness. One night, the temperature dropped so low the walls cracked like gunfire. Even with the stove blazing, cold crept in like a thief. Maggie's teeth chattered under the quilts. Eli lay on the floor, shivering in his buffalo robe, listening to her grow still in a way that made him fear the cold was winning. This is foolish, she whispered into the dark. You take your bed back. I'll sit by the fire. Neither of us is going to freeze for the sake of propriety, Eli said. He rose, pulled the robe to the bed, and sat against the headboard. We share the buffalo hide. Body heat's better than stubbornness. There was a pause, then a soft, all right. She leaned into him, trembling, small and warm against his side. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, steady as a rock, not asking for more than survival. Slowly, her shivers eased. Her head drooped against his shoulder. He sat still as stone, watching the fire light flicker, aware of every breath she took. By dawn, the storm had eased. She stirred awake, pulled away quick, but not sharply. She only whispered, "Thank you." That morning, as sunlight broke across the frozen valley, Eli knew the storm outside had passed. But another kind of storm was beginning inside his cabin. A storm made of choices, of trust, of two lives, colliding in ways neither had planned, and he knew one thing for certain. Whatever path lay ahead, nothing would be the same again. The days after the storm passed were quiet, but they weren't empty. Snow lay thick across the valley, burying trails and fences, cutting them off from the rest of the world. It was as if God himself had pressed pause on everything but the two of them in that cabin. Maggie moved about like she had always belonged there. She baked bread that filled the room with warmth richer than fire. She mended Eli's old shirts with careful stitches, turning rags into garments fit for another season. She read aloud from his worn copy of Ivanhoe in the evenings while he worked leather or carved wood by the fire. Her voice made the small cabin feel like a place far bigger, like the world wasn't just snow and silence. Eli watched her sometimes without meaning to. The way her brow furrowed when she concentrated on kneading dough. The way her laughter, rare but real, lit the cabin brighter than lamplight. She wasn't a burden as she feared. She was a reminder of what life could be when shared. One morning he took her to the barn. A cow was heavy with calf and he wanted her to see. "Close now," he said as he checked the animal's flanks. Tomorrow maybe. Maggie stood beside him holding the lantern. Her face glowed gold in the light. "She's beautiful. She's profitable," Eli replied, though he saw her smile at the cow the way some women smiled at babies. "You can say she's beautiful. It won't break your cowboy pride." He glanced at her, catching the spark in her green eyes. "All right, she's beautiful and profitable." Her laugh came free, bright as sunlight on snow. It startled him, tightened his chest in ways the cold never could. But peace didn't last. By the third week, the sound of horses broke the stillness. Eli's gut told him who it was before he saw the riders. Owen Blackledge rode tall in his silver-studded saddle, the sheriff beside him. Two hired men trailing behind. They pulled up at Eli's porch where he stood waiting, Winchester leaning against the wall within reach. "Eli," Owen said, tipping his hat with mock politeness. "I hear you've been harboring stolen property." Eli's jaw tightened. "Nothing stolen here, only shelter given to someone about to die in a storm." Owen's eyes narrowed. "My bride. Brought her clear from Boston. Paid for her passage. That makes her mine." The cabin door opened. Then Maggie stepped out. Blue wool dress mended but neat, chin high, dignity wrapped around her like armor. "I am not property, Mr. Blackledge," she said. Her voice rang clear against the snow. "You abandoned me at the crossroads. You gave me this paper." She held out the letter he had signed. "Agreement terminated. No further obligation." The sheriff took it, read slowly, then looked up. "Seems legal enough, Owen. You ended it yourself." Owen's face went red. "She tricked me. Threatened scandal." "I never spoke a word of threat." Maggie cut in, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You decided I wasn't suitable. Those were your exact words." Owen's hired hand spat tobacco into the snow. "Woman remembers exact words. I'm educated, Mr. Coulter," Maggie said coldly. "I remember everything, including how Mr. Blackledge told the station master to hold the train because the goods weren't as advertised." Eli stepped closer then, calm but steady, a wall between Maggie and the men. "Storm's over," he said. "She stays here if she chooses. That's the end of it. Alone, unmarried. You'll ruin her name." Owen sneered. Eli's eyes didn't leave his. "Folks can say what they like. Doesn't change the truth." The sheriff cleared his throat. "Miss Doyle, are you here by your own free will?" "I am." "Anyone forcing you to stay?" "No one." The sheriff looked at Owen. "Then that settles it. You've no claim." Owen's hand twitched toward his gun belt. Eli's fingers brushed the stock of his rifle. The air froze sharper than the snow. Finally, the sheriff broke the moment civil matters settled. Let it lie, Owen glared, red-faced. This isn't over. He wheeled his horse, spurring it hard, snow flying. His men followed, one looking ashamed enough to tip his hat toward Maggie before leaving. When they were gone, Eli let out a breath slow and heavy. Maggie was shaking now, though she hadn't in front of Owen. He poured her a cup of coffee with a splash of whiskey to steady her hands. He'll come back, she whispered. Let him, Eli said. Every time he does, he shows more folks who he really is. She looked at him long, eyes full of worry and something deeper. My reputation's ruined now, staying here unmarried. Reputation's just what other people think, Eli said quietly. What matters is what you know to be true. Her gaze held his, searching for something. Why are you really helping me, Eli Mercer? He thought of his mother, who had built a life out of nothing but hard land and harder choices. He thought of the strength in Maggie's spine when she faced Owen. He thought of the sound of her laugh in the barn. Because you're not nothing, he said finally. And you deserve choices Owen would never give you. Maggie's eyes softened, though her chin stayed high. And if my choice is to stay, Eli didn't blink. Then you stay. As long as you want, as whatever you want to be. For the first time since she had come, her shoulders eased. She nodded once like she was setting her own jaw against the world. Then I'll stay outside, the snow whispered across the valley, carrying with it the promise of more storms to come. But inside, something stronger than storms was beginning to take root. Spring finally came to Sweetwater Valley, softening the drifts of snow into streams that filled the creeks and greened the grass. Life began again in the fields, but trouble, like weeds, had a way of growing alongside the good. Owen Blackidge did not forgive. His men cut Eli's fences. His cattle went missing in the night. A dead chicken was left on the porch as a warning. The message was clear. He wanted Maggie back under his power, or else he wanted her ruined. But Maggie was no longer the frightened woman who had stumbled into Eli's cabin in a storm. She asked him to teach her to shoot, and within days, she was knocking tin cans from the fence posts with a steady hand. She stood beside him during chores, worked the bread dough with flour up to her elbows, and stitched their lives together with the same care she stitched his shirts. One Sunday, when the gossip grew loud in town, Maggie made a choice. She stood before the congregation in the small wooden church, her back straight, her voice strong. She told them everything. How Owen had written letters full of promises, how he had abandoned her in a storm, how Eli had taken her in with nothing but kindness and respect. She read Owen's own words aloud from his letters, and she held up the paper where he had ended the agreement. This man calls me property, she said, her voice clear. But I am a woman with a name, with dignity, with the right to choose. And I chose to survive. Whispers filled the church. Some frowned, but others nodded. Old Tom Garrett stood, saying Eli had been a fair neighbor, never turning away a man in need. Mrs. Patterson, the doctor's wife, rose, too, saying Maggie had saved children with her quick thinking. One by one, voices rose in her defense. Owen left that day, his pride wounded, but his power cracked. Weeks later, Maggie stood beside Eli under a cottonwood tree on the rise above the creek. Neighbors gathered in a circle, Reverend Cole with his Bible in hand. Maggie wore her mended blue dress, Eli his best shirt. They spoke their vows with no grand music, only the wind and the branches and the creek singing below. Eli slipped a thin gold ring, his mother's, onto Maggie's finger. For the first time, they kissed before others, careful and brief, but strong enough to seal what winter had begun. But Owen was not done. That very afternoon, smoke rose from Eli's hay barn. Neighbors ran to help, forming bucket lines, beating back flames with wet blankets. Maggie herself grabbed a shovel, digging a firebreak when sparks jumped toward the cabin. Her dress tore, her hands blistered, but she worked like she belonged to the land itself. The barn burned, but the cabin and stock were saved. Owen arrived on horseback, smug as a wolf. "Shame about your barn," he said. Eli faced him with soot on his hands and neighbors at his side. "Every fire you start just proves what kind of man you are. And every time more people stand against you." This time Owen had no answer. He rode off, and though he returned in whispers and threats, his hold on the valley slipped with every season. Years passed. Maggie became the valley's teacher. Her classroom filled with ranchers, children, her lessons as steady as her hands. Eli's ranch grew strong. His cattle thriving, his fences mended not just with wire, but with the trust of neighbors. They raised 2 children, Emma and Thomas, who learned to walk in the grass of the valley and laugh in the shadow of the cottonwood tree where their parents had wed. One autumn, Owen returned, old and worn, his pride long burned out. He brought a lawyer and a donation for the school. "I've done more wrong than I can count," he admitted, voice cracked like dry earth. "But maybe I can leave something better behind." Maggie looked at him with steady eyes. "He can't undo the past, Owen. But the children will take your books, even if they never know your name." When he left for the last time, Maggie stood with Eli on their porch, watching the valley that had once been barren of trust, now full of families, laughter, and life. "Do you ever regret it?" Eli asked quietly. "That storm, that night, the life we built from it?" Maggie leaned against him, her hand resting over his. "Not once. That blizzard was the best thing that ever happened to me. It brought me here. It brought me you." The wind moved through the cottonwood leaves, carrying away the last memory of Owen Blackidge and settling peace around the cabin. Inside, their children laughed. The fire glowed and the bread Maggie had baked filled the air with its rich scent. From a desperate knock in a storm to a home filled with love, Eli and Maggie's story was not one of property or profit, but of choices, courage, and the kind of love that grows stronger with every trial. And in the heart of Sweetwater Valley, under the wide Wyoming sky, that love endured. Strong as the land itself, lasting as the creek that never stopped singing.